Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been wanting to interview you for a long time now, so I'm kind of glad we got this arranged and organised. How are you? How are you doing today? You've been up to much, or?
I had a shoot this morning, so that was good. It was just a commission. Obviously, I sees myself around Bath and Bristol based at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's I keep my freelance work as a kind of a side piece to what I do full time. Full time, I work in a gallery in Bath, curating and do business administration there. But adversed and keeping myself within the creative industry and doing something that I'm really passionate about. So I have the best of both worlds in a way.
And just to give everyone kind of an insight into Mike's professional kind of what he does. So Mike is a commercial and documentary photographer situated in Bristol, UK. His work often focuses surrounding social and environmental influences, exploring and looking into how people are influenced by their surroundings. And kind of recently, this has led Mike to being published both nationally and internationally. Most recently, being featured in the Royal Photographic Society, and shortlisted for the IPA expedition. How recent was that? So whenabouts was?
I submitted a piece of work for that at the end of last year, and I'll get onto that later about that project.
Yeah,
but that was submitted at the end of last year and then shortlisted this July, and then it's a whole process of you have to produce a print, and then that goes through a panel of judges, and then if that print is then selected as part of the final 100 prints and is then a touring exhibition around the UK. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in a couple of weeks' time, I'll find out whether I've been successful. And I think it starts off at the Royal Photographic Society in Bristol.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Oh, yeah, that's exciting. I congratulate you on that. But
Thank you.
I will ask you later about it further into the interview. But so just as where did you study photography? Where?
So, it's a bit of a long whirlwind. First started. Do you want me to go back to the basics of kind of where it all kicked off?
Yeah. Let's go from the start because.
So my dad was part of a amateur photography club, and my whole kind of school life, I have dyslexia,
yeah,
and I always found it hard to focus within a classroom. And I always found that when I was going through kind of the the curriculum at school, that I always was fascinated with art. I'm not saying that I'm not fascinated with other subjects, but art for me was just a way of being able to kind of, get out of classroom of constantly writing, maths, doing all the stuff you do. And then I think one day my tutor at school brought in cameras, and we had a whole lesson on photography, and we were making collages, and we were sent out tasks and challenges. And it was through that I kind of picked up this fascination. And I remember going home from school that day, and I was saying, "Oh, look, I've done this today. I really enjoyed it." And found out that my dad was part of a camera club. So we would often use our weekends to kind of just go and explore and do recce's and go and photograph weird and wonderful things. And then I had one teacher at school that said to me, and I can remember it now, she said, "I think you could make it in a career as a photographer." And that kind of really got the ball rolling for me.
For someone to say that to you, at kind of such a young age, what did that mean for you in that moment?
Do you know what? It actually meant nothing at all, because I was just like, what? Right, okay. You kind of a bit like, oh, I don't know. You don't know what you're going to do at that age. Let's be honest. Yeah. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do at that age. But then I kind of thought, look, maybe she's right. And then I kind of, at a young age, I actually was commissioned to do some work for people. So I was like, oh no, look, I could make money out of this. So then went on to study it, and then went to do university in the University of Gloucestershire, photojournalism and documentary photography. And I studied 3 years there, and graduated in 2020, right into the midst of a pandemic. It wasn't ideal. And it was just through that course and the love of photography that I've kind of explored different avenues and different areas that I could go down. And the strangest thing for me during those 3 years was I don't know about you, Liam, with your course at UWE, but the one kind of term and module that I really enjoyed was the business side of things. So I really loved kind of the nitty gritty of kind of like freelancing and how to set up your own company and limited company and so on and so forth. And that's kind of driven me to where I am now in terms of I've kind of pushed the photography to one side, and I use my photography as kind of like a little side business, and then I've stuck my head in the door of arts in general, to become a curator and a business administrator for a gallery. And I kind of wanted to do that because I knew that if I was to pursue photography as a full-time job, then I would just completely lose my passion for it.
Yeah.
So then I thought I want to kind of get into the arts, but then not limit myself to one form. So I've kind of worked on all sorts of different projects, community projects, and then just project manage and look at helping support artists as well as people that are already established.
And would you say that you're enjoying the balance between, I guess, having that separation between something you enjoy and also obviously like it being also like a business? Or
yeah, I'm a weird person, Liam. I actually love like just your general making a list spreadsheets. Not many people probably say they would, but for me, I think I get so fixated on stuff like that that the job itself, and it's so cliche, but they say if you find a job you enjoy the most, you never work a day in your life. And for me, that is so true. And it's so nice as well that I can have that good like work-life balance between doing that and then doing the photography on the side and just exploring personal projects and paid commission.
Do you remember like the first shot you ever took?
The first photograph I ever took, oh god. Yeah, I think, and I can remember I was playing with motion blur, and I remember getting my camera set up on a tripod in my mum's kitchen, and I was photographing water droplets from a tap into a bowl and then trying to capture the water droplets bouncing out of the water. And that was that's what really fixated. I was thinking, oh my gosh, I can do anything with a camera. And that's kind of where I was really fascinated with how you could do all these weird and wonderful things.
Yeah, because I guess especially when you're learning how to use the camera I guess there's loads of different types of cameras, but if you're using digital,
yeah, 100%.
It's very experimental. It's very fun, very playful.
Exactly.
You can gain like loads of ideas just from doing like the most simplest thing. But
yeah, and I think that's what I loved is the fact that I could one day do one thing with it and one day do another. And I was always thinking, like, if I was to do painting, I know that you've got different styles, but you're always stuck in one way. Whereas you can take a camera outside, you can keep it inside, you can use flash, you can do all sorts, And like, there's so many, like, you're not limited to one kind of style, which is what I like.
And going on talking about style, in like 3 words, how would you best describe your photographic style?
My style, raw, poetic and emotional, I would say.
And why specifically those 3 words?
Because my work over the past few years has been very much based around loss, relationships, and emotion, in the way that I have now come to realize that I absolutely am fascinated by people, and all of my work is influenced by people, as you previously mentioned. And I just have a obsession with learning about people and then kind of using my camera as a way to help them share a story, or for me to understand them better, because I'm not a socially awkward person. I can talk to anyone, but I find sometimes in a situation that I use the camera as a way of putting a barrier between myself and my subject. And then I can feel like that kind of breaks that mold. So over the past, going back to kind of university, in the first year of university, I started a project photographing my grandmother. and she'd just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I was focusing on that project in particular, and I shot that all the way through university. And then during the pandemic, when I came out of university and there was just no chance of kind of going into a job, there was nothing. So I kind of sat at home for 2 years, and it kind of put me, like, I was ready to kind of go into industry and break in and do what I wanted to do. And I just thought, I can't, because no one was out, everyone was locked in. So I thought, what can I do? And at that time, my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer of all forms of different types, and he had 6 months to live. And I used my camera to document his last 6 months, and used my grandmother as well, and was photographing them both together, because my grandmother's memory is slowly starting to fade. And it was watching that relationship that they'd had over 60 odd years together. And even though my grandmother kind of loosely understood what was going on, like, she wasn't fully aware. So it was kind of, for me, a way of photographing them and their relationship, and the way that she still tried to care for him, even though that she knew that, like, he was passing away. And she always thought, oh, he's just got a cold, you know. And I built that series up to a point that it was photographing from when they were absolutely fine, just going about their daily lives. It's kind of a middle section of kind of like this photographing on the day that we found out about this terminal illness, to then I've actually photographed it right up until the last week of him dying, and then the week after. So then there's this whole collation of work now that it's been published a couple of places, but I haven't put it together as a book. And I'm not sure if I want to, you know, like, I'm holding on to it, but at the same time, like, I want to get it out there. And I know it's a series that I hope, and I hope that lots of people can kind of connect with.
No, absolutely. I think the project itself is quite touching. Also, it's very personal, and it, as you kind of are experimenting with relationship, love, loss. I think on a kind of mutual level, it's something that everyone has to go through, and I think that's why the project itself is so powerful, because it's also understanding it from your perspective as the photographer.
So that's right. I thought that it would be, in a way, hard, but like, they said, and ever since they were actually with us, they said that they wanted me to use my camera in any way possible. They said, if you want to come in and photograph us at our worst or at our best, then you can. And for me, that didn't make me feel like, oh, I'm being judged here. Why should I be photographing this? And I think the response that I've had is everyone so far have said, like, this is a lovely memento that you can look back on and just appreciate that they lived a life together that was so, like, intimate, but also so respectful.
And do you feel like this project had at the time brought you closer, like, in terms of like relationship with your family, or with your grandma and your granddad?
I would say so, yeah. Obviously some people didn't get it, but that's like with anything you do. Yeah, I would say it has. I think for me, like, it was my way of, like, grieving. Like, I'm not a very emotional person. But by doing that project, it allowed me to kind of form a closer relationship with both my grandparents, definitely.
And also, in terms of the names as sparrows, where did that title come from?
That comes from the fact that my granddad was a very keen bird watcher, and he always told me, and at the end of his garden he had a bird table, and he always said that the most faithful birds that stay together for life are sparrows. And that's why I called the project Sparrows, because for me, that was kind of a metaphor of them together as a couple. And they always shared that love and the passion of bird watching.
It's a really good title for the project itself. It works well, and it's also very sentimental to both yourself and your granddad. Has this project changed your approach for other projects that you've done since doing that project?
I would say yes. I think I've definitely come up, like, new projects with kind of more of an open eye. Like, I'm not just going in now and just shooting for the sake of it. Like, I'm shooting, then I'm making sure that what I'm shooting is A, makes sense to me, but B, makes sense to the viewer. Kind of, I always now go into it knowing what my end goal is going to be, whereas before, like, I'd just shoot for the sake of it and wouldn't know what I'm going to do with it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I would say, yeah, I feel like my work has definitely moved in that direction of being more poetic in a way that I would say it's an elliptical narrative where people can form their own connections. And it's not just me pushing some work in front of them and hoping that they get it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think because you somewhat want to be on the same level as the subject. You don't. I feel like there's a lot of photography. Well, I don't want to seem like I'm giving my biased opinion, but I feel like there's a lot of photography out there at the moment where I love photography. I love documentary.
Yeah.
I like the process of getting to know the people you are working with, whether it's family, whether it's someone you've met for the first time, whether the whole process of just building up that relationship with that person.
Yeah. And I'd also say that, and I don't know about you, and it's just my opinion, but I got so bored of everyone shooting documentary projects in film. Like, everyone does it, and I feel like the straight documentary format is so true, and film is just a thing that's going to phase out over time. It's kind of got this hipster kind of connotations with it, and as much as I used to like shooting film, I just wanted to kind of go at work now just completely straight documentary, not trying to like sugarcoat anything, and just trying to show everything in its rawest form. And that's kind of what I try to stay true to. I always make sure that I don't pose my subjects. Sometimes I do, but I'm always trying to capture that kind of that natural feel. And I hope that's kind of visible through the work that you see.
No, it absolutely is. I think it is, and I kind of wrote a little question that I wanted to ask you in relation to
Mm.
truth within documentary photography. I was also like reading an article just about the correlation between the two to see whether there was a crossover. Um,
Yeah.
but for you, does a photograph represent truth?
Oh, I feel like if you're coming at a body of work that's been shot solely based off of a documentary, straight documentary narrative, then I would say yes. But I still think that there's room within that. Like, I'm going to be completely honest. Sometimes, like I said, I will stage a photograph. So I would say no. I would say no, because you're always going to have to manipulate something in the slightest way.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and it's especially within photography. I guess there are. It's hard not to manipulate or want to
It's just,
change your.
yeah, it's so hard. You can't go about photographing something and you move, like, I don't know, if you're shooting someone and there's a glass of water on it, you move something out of the way. Your eyes are always looking for that object that you want to move, and that's
Yeah,
where I feel you just can't get away from it. So no, I don't think so.
the other question I was going to ask is you kind of answered it there, but I was going to say when is it untruthful? But you've kind of given.
Yeah, I think when you're moving physical objects out of the way of shots, or you're physically positioning someone into a different environment because you feel that would better the subject or better the kind of intensity of the story that you're trying to portray, then that's for me is when it changes completely.
Do you feel like editing comes within that?
Yeah, I would agree. I I've been guilty of over editing before. I think, again, you've just got to stay truthful to your subject, because you're putting yourself in their shoes at the end of the day, and you're trying to represent their story, and they wouldn't want you to kind of, I don't know, overly edit their perspective or the way that they want to be shown to your target and intended audience.
Yeah, no, I agree. In terms of projects, like how do you prepare for your projects? So
Do you know
do you have
what
like a picture in mind in your head beforehand before taking the images you take, or how do you?
I go completely blind into projects apart from knowing what my end goal is, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but I I go about I've got my phone, like, notes on my iPhone, and in my notes is loads of different project ideas that I want to do, and And funnily enough, one of my projects that I shot last year called Home Straight, which was based on young pigeon racers and fanciers. I was just watching the news, and there was a section on these young boys that were racing pigeons. I was like, look, that would be an awesome project to shoot. So I kind of started to do some research and found out that around where I live, there was a local club, and within that local club, there was 3 young guys who were the youngest pigeon fanciers within the southwest region, and just kind of got really fixated on the idea that this underground, well, this once popular sport of pigeon racing, which still is up in the north, but not as much down here, is still kind of done by young boys who I would have thought would have grown up on iPad culture and, all this technological stuff, that the rawest form of enjoyment with these people chucking pigeons in the air and seeing what gets back quickest.
And I also think, in terms of the projects that you've done and the projects I've seen through the extensive research I've done, what I love about your project is that you find projects, or you find themes or groups of people who are either, like, I don't know, unknown, or not.
Yeah,
I don't, you know what I mean? I can't explain it, but like, you pick.
I would say they are groups of people that people would tend not to want to approach.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that you go in deep with those projects, but you also meet a series of, like, a bunch of different individuals within that.
Yeah, and I always think that's important, because especially with the project on the pigeon fanciers, there were so many people that I could have photographed, but again, I kind of was fixated on these 3 young guys. And that project's still ongoing. I haven't shot it for a while. I'm just waiting to kind of shoot some more for that. But it was a way of you have to kind of go in first of all without the camera, get to know them really well, and then you start shooting. And and they were fascinating. They didn't just do pigeons. I found out they have ferrets and all sorts of stuff. And for me, it was just completely eye-opening. It was another kind of, you enter another world almost.
Essentially, what I feel you're doing is that you're kind of challenging what we're used to seeing, which I really enjoy. Like, I feel like a lot of documentary projects can sometimes be quite cliche or quite repetitive. So, Mike, of the cameras that you currently own, what are some of your favorites?
I would have to say the camera that my favorite is I've got a Sony A7 Mark II, but I've got my granddad's old 50mm Canon FD film lens on it that I use, and it gives that kind of really vintage aesthetic. That's probably my go-to. In terms of my corporate stuff, it's just a load of other cameras. And then I've also got a Mamiya RB67 film 120 that I love shooting as well. Hardly ever pull it out because it's an absolute weight. But I would say those are my main go-to cameras really. And then I've just got a point and shoot Contax T2 I'm looking at getting, hopefully. I'm not really one of those guys that is fascinated by their cameras, if you know what I mean. As much as I like photography, I would say that it's not about what you use, it's about how you use it.
So you wouldn't say you're like some form of, like, a collector?
No, definitely not.
And in terms of, like, acquiring your cameras, like, where do you source your cameras from?
I've used a couple of places. So a couple of often I'm gifted cameras because people obviously know that I have a passion for photography. That's one main way. Another one is I just use, your typical selling sites for cameras, and then there's another one. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. It's called Y Cameras in Yorkshire, and they're really good for kind of getting film cameras if you want those. And just your typical kind of MPB secondhand. All of my kit's secondhand, apart from my corporate stuff. But yeah, I don't really go out my way to buy loads of fancy kit. In a way, I'm trying to reduce my kit because I feel like I've got too much.
Because I only have one camera. I sold I can't remember what digital it was. It was Canon. It was years ago, but I sold that, and then I just bought a Canon AE1 film. and I just
Yeah,
love it. I just use that because it's simple and I love it. I prefer film.
it's such a nice camera, and it's such a workhorse as well.
It does weigh a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's just I enjoy the process of. I like the idea. The reason I like film, or I lean more towards film, is because I like the idea of not really knowing. Like, I know what I'm taking the photo of, but a lot of the time I forget what I've previously
100%.
shot.
I would say that obviously I'm not really into the film
Yeah,
photography scene,
yeah,
but I would say that it's good in a way that it slows your process down. Like you have to be really considerate of what you're shooting because you only get either 12 or more shots. And it makes you really think about what you're getting as well. Which is what I really hats off to people that shoot film religiously.
because it's a lot of time as well.
And a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, because film is not cheap.
No. Thanks to the Kardashians.
And is there like like a particular camera that you haven't currently got, which you plan like you hope to acquire
Yeah.
someday?
So funnily enough, my girlfriend's dad is really, really keen on photography. And I went to visit them last week and looked at his collection of Fuji cameras. And I've got a small Fuji point and shoot, but I really kind of want to pick up a couple of X Pros or kind of go for the bigger, bigger Fuji models. I think
Yeah.
that those for me are beautiful camera systems, and I think I will eventually move over to them. I was always stuck in my ways of Canon, and that was my first camera, and then I kind of went off of Canon just because I hated the color profile, and then shifted over to Sony because I was kind of looking at mirrorless at the time. It was a new thing, and felt that Sony was probably my best bet, and that I could use my original lenses from that camera and adapt them to the Sony, so I didn't have to then obviously pay more. But every time I've picked up a Fuji, it just feels special. So I think in the next couple of years or months, I'll probably dip into that market and
Have you not tried to? Because I know at like uni, I don't know,
yeah,
they use a lot of Nikon. I don't know
yeah,
if it's the same for you, but Nikon is like a whole new
no, I've
thing
always
that I've
been
never.
I've never really liked Nikon. They had them at college when I went to college and never could get used to them at all. And I just found that the Canon for me was more simple, more easy to understand. And that was my first ever camera. So I'm kind of one of those idiots that is either a Canon or a Nikon user, and they're always like, "Oh, you use Canon or you."
The
But it
divide.
doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, it's just a camera, and like I said, it's not what you do. It's not what you've got. It's what you do with it. So
Going back to talking about like I guess collections of cameras. I can't remember. So I think it was with my ex. I went with her to. I was having them move out, and we were
yeah,
dropping some stuff off at someone else's house for storage. And I went into their apartment, and I went downstairs. So imagine like you're going downstairs into kind of like a cellar room. And it's
yeah,
just like full of like it's just storage. There's just crap like everywhere. But in that room, on like a Calyx unit, like a massive like Calyx unit,
yeah.
they just had like I've probably like the most cameras I've seen in one place.
Really?
And there were so many. I was so amazed by it. I took a photo of it because I was like, I don't know how this person has collected this many cameras.
Did you have a
Um,
chance to pocket any?
no, I didn't. I
Just
just take the whole thing with me.
go on, Liam, help yourself.
I really I should be more technical with or I should know more about my cameras, but I don't because I'm unfortunately
Yeah,
at while I was studying I didn't really pay attention. I just enjoyed taking photos and
yeah,
experimenting in
yeah.
them.
I feel like for me as well, like at university, I never really like used enough of the equipment, so I just never really tried it out because I was always stuck in my ways of what I liked and knew what I liked. But it's so weird, isn't it? That you get fascinated by one thing and then you're stuck in your ways. I'm such a hoarder as well that it's so hard to get rid of things that I've got. Even small things such as reflectors, studio reflectors. I'm such a like little weirdo. Like I get so attached to them.
Would you say like say you weren't doing photography, could you see yourself like what would you be doing instead if photography wasn't your thing?
What would I be doing? Oh gosh, I think it falls back to what I do now, to be honest. Marketing and sales really kind of that's my other thing that I can do on the side. Like I do a lot I can do coding, and I just love talking to people. So I know it fits in with obviously the photography and the people, but something where it's very much customer like forward facing, and just being able to like problem solve, which is what I love.
Yeah.
I love anything to do with problem solving, or just thinking of like creative solutions for certain situations. Project
And
management, I'd say, is definitely the way I'm going at the moment.
no, I think that's a great thing, or like quite a good skill to have under your belt, in a
Definitely.
multitude of different platforms, whether
Yeah, I
it's
kind of don't want to limit, like, don't want to have a limit to what I can do, if you know what I mean. There's always a chance to evolve and learn and create.
well, when you went into university to study photography, what was your like what was the aim? What was the because I feel like based on my
My
understanding, yeah, well, like even so, like just based on my understanding, a lot of people when they go into photography, they don't go in because they want to become like
yeah,
a photographer
I'm
full time. That's it's very difficult to do that as well.
being completely honest. I think I went in thinking that I'm gonna. It sounds so egotistical, but I was like, I know that I'm good at what I do, and I was like, I think I can make it as a full-time photographer, and I feel like I'm at a standard like now, especially in my third year, was like I knew that I wanted to do that, and I knew that I wanted to be published, and I got published. But coming out of university into a pandemic completely stopped me, and I'm still kind of dealing with that now in the way that like it's halted my TV. Like I'm where I want to be, but like I know I would have been so much further ahead if it wasn't for that pandemic, and it just completely changed my perspective on me as a photographer, and kind of using that time off to kind of completely reflect on like where I am, and even as deep as like who you are as a person, like it really changed me.
Do you feel like you're a different person now to who you were
Yeah,
from
100%.
like just before you left uni? Or
Yeah, 100%. Like for me this year, like lots of things have changed in a really good way. Like in terms of like my like just what I do is in my career, and like people I've met this year. And I'm definitely in a much better place than I was, but it's kind of it's weird. You always think, and I always ponder back and think, where would I have been if it wasn't for lockdown? Or what would I have been doing? Um, but I feel like the most intimate work I made was during lockdown, definitely, and that was the work that kind of I felt went out and pushed my name, not massively, not saying that at all, but slightly into the industry, definitely.
because I share that same opinion with you about doing creating the word during lockdown. Like lockdown was kind of like a blessing in disguise in a way, even though it was awful time
Yeah,
lockdown. But I was in that time you were able to create loads of work, and so was I. For me, it was the very point at which I started doing this. So like, if that
yeah,
didn't happen, because it provided so much time.
no, and like I appreciate you for getting me on here, 100%.
As I said before, it's more beneficial, I feel, for you to kind of have that space to open up
Mm,
and speak. Because I think it's going back to kind of why I implemented this podcast or set it up was because I felt there wasn't a platform post uni for artists, upcoming artists, to actually talk in detail fully about what they're doing, what their projects
yeah,
they've been part of. Like you do that anyway, sometimes like through doing individual projects, through talks or guest speakers. I know you've done some of that as well, but
definitely.
I think having this time to it's yeah, basically it's just time to reflect. Um,
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, especially the students now, like I know I was only a student 2 years ago, but like to be able to give them like a little nugget of information, or how can I've always been a person of like trying to help others. Like how can I help the next generation, even though I know I'm within that generation? Like how can I help better their opportunity through what I understand?
no, I know, I agree. I think it's important to have that approach.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, because you enjoy the work you do more because you're helping others. You are also
Exactly.
helping yourself, but in the
Oh,
process,
100%.
you're learning about other people's experiences, their stories. You're collaborating, and you're building yourself up as an
Yeah,
individual, as an artist.
100%. 100% agree about that.
Going into some of your like portrait photography, I wanted to ask, so when you're like photographing or when you're shooting with a subject,
Yes.
what is the process you go through to ensure that they feel comfortable and relaxed?
I always take 10 minutes before just to have a conversation. And it sounds so cliche, but we just talk about what did they do last night? What did they go up to in the week? Just completely break it down and see if there's a connection or something that we have in common. And then after that, then I kind of go into the whole like process of like framing and photographing and getting them how I want them to be, because I always find that I've shot people before and they've just been so unnatural. And even I've had that 10 minutes with them, they can't unwind. But the people that I have shot feel comfortable in front of the camera. You can always tell, and I don't know whether you understand this as being a photographer as well, or having the experience within photography. You can always tell the photos that feel uncomfortable, but then you can always see the photo that is more relaxed. And I don't think there's only ever been one occasion where I photographed someone and it really was hard to photograph them. But I'd say 9 out of 10 times, then I feel that yeah, I feel that people are comfortable in front of the camera when I photograph them, because I have those skills as a people person that I can make them feel comfortable and feel like it's not just me wanting to get a photo of them for the sake of getting a photo for them.
No, no, I think, and also for you, it's because you're a people person, because you're approachable, and
Mm,
you've been doing this quite a long time, but also naturally the subject or the person or the client you're working with will be drawn towards you because essentially what you want is, and I know that you're photographing them and stuff, but especially when you're working one on one, you kind of want them to be on the same level as you.
exactly. And I think that's the best way to get a true representation across, because otherwise it just goes back. And even when I'm shooting portraiture, I know it's obviously not linked. It might be linked to a photo story that I'm working on, but if it's just I know, like a commissioned portrait, I always try and make them feel like they need to tell a story, because that's how I feel that you get the best representation of that person across. Because after 20 minutes or so, people do tend to relax, and then you can really get down and shoot them how you want them to be perceived, and how they want to be perceived. Definitely.
And do you what kind of equipment do you use, whether
Oh,
it's in
you know
studio
what?
or
I'm so basic when it comes to shooting. Studio is just your typical flash kit, what you would have, like reflectors, beauty dish, all of that. But when it comes to shooting, I always like to shoot my portraits in like an outside setting, because I can do studio. Um, I just tend not to enjoy it as much. But when it comes to my portraiture outside, then I just stick to my trusty Sony, and I use all my vintage lenses and my art lenses, and just shoot. I just shoot and hope. I know that sounds so bad, but like I just shoot and hope, because I have a trust in my equipment that I use, and I know its limitations, and I know how far I can push it. Um, and I've never felt that I'm not gonna create. I know I've created bad portraits, but then I always look back and think I always get nervous to the build up of shooting people. Then I always have to pep talk myself and say, look, you can shoot a good portrait. Um, and then if I'm ever having a day where I feel like I can't shoot a good bit of work, then I always just look back on stuff that I've done in the past and go, oh no, you can create something that's half decent. And that's kind of the process, you always have battles with yourself, but you know, just gotta keep going and trying and shooting.
and kind of going back to something you just mentioned in terms of, I'm going to go back to the studio, but what about working within the studio environment is something that you're not attracted to?
Just sometimes feel so clinical. Like, it just feels like you're in an operating room and that you constantly moving these light sources around and trying to get the best representation, and for me it's not. I do like it now and again, but I have to be in the mood to be in a studio, because I get distracted. I get distracted so easily, Liam. I could be playing around with light meters all day if I'm not careful. But it's for me, it's too hectic. I really like to strip things back and just shoot in a completely neutral setting. and just make myself, I have to be comfortable to shoot. I can't be in an environment where I don't feel confident or comfortable. And sometimes for me, the studio really pushes me. Um, Probably partly because, if I'm being honest, like I didn't do much of it at university. And then when I came out and I got chucked in the deep end of shooting studio, and I kind of picked it up as I'm going along, I maybe don't have the confidence I want to have in studio. I know I can shoot a well lit photograph, but I feel like it's a pressure environment for me. And I'm not backing away from it, but I just I'm such a perfectionist that I don't want to produce something that's bad.
And I think that's a good. I think that's a good way of thinking.
Yeah.
Um, I personally think the studio is quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, and you can, I don't know, in the time that I did a lot of studio stuff at uni, but I think there's more problems I found.
Mm.
More things can go wrong.
I think the thing that I do like about it is that problem solving of like, oh, you've got a shadow to the left. How are you gonna counteract that? Or if you're gonna position this here, what should I do differently? I love the problem solving element of it. It's more like you say, it's the hustle and bustle. If it's a used studio where you've got two shoots going on at the same time, then I'm so bad at like losing not focus but concentration, and it has to be stripped right back.
But then also, I think do you feel like it's also distracting for
Yeah,
the client you're
exactly.
photographing?
Exactly. Sometimes I wanted my client to feel comfortable, and if I'm putting them in a busy environment, then how am I going to get that again, that true representation of how I want them to be? I feel like, yeah, you're completely right. It can be very daunting if you've never been in a studio before.
And usually the subjects that you're photographing, are they people you know? Like, what's the connection?
Um, yeah, it's it's weird. Like I've shot a lot of friends over the years just to build up my portfolio in terms of my portraiture. But then obviously, um, quite a bit of my work recently is just people that have contacted me that either want headshots or it's been portraits for magazines or different clients in turn. But the connection is always weird. Like I find it easier to photograph people I don't know than friends, because the people that I don't know, I find that they don't know me, and then you're kind of in that moment. You're talking to them, you're getting to know them better, then you're shooting them, and then the relationship is then built up through the photograph that you've taken for them. Whereas friends kind of already have this perceived like idea of what I'm going to do, and like, oh, they always like joke around saying, oh, can you add a third eye on my head and stupid stuff like that. But I don't know. It's a hard one. I never feel connection in terms of corporate work, because it's just it sounds ruthless, but I'm just there to be paid and make and create a good photograph. But especially when it comes to my documentary portraiture, then that's where I really, really form connections, because I've invested my time into that person, and I've really wanting to go out of my and I know they've gone out of their way to help me out. So at the same time, I need to respect that that's a choice that they've made to actually partake in what I'm doing as an artist.
And I'm gonna move more towards your kind of commercial slash
Mm.
editorial work. I just wanted to ask, what do you think is the most important aspect of a commercial photograph?
The most important aspect. Gosh, I think just to get across, if you're coming from are you coming from a commercial photograph that a client has set you?
Let's go from the client's perspective. Like
I
from
would say just like 100% nailing on what they want you to do. But also at the same time being able to collaborate with them and getting across your style. I think the worst thing is when you go into a shoot for a client and they don't hire you on the fact that, or sorry, no, they hire you. I think they should hire you for your style, and then you collaborate on what they want. Whereas don't just go in there shooting for the sake of it. And I would say don't be scared to try new things, if you know what I mean.
because I'm assuming they give you like a brief.
Yeah, you'd get a brief and kind of some guidelines of what they need. So obviously stick to the guidelines, but they're just a set of rules that can be bent. That's the way I look at them.
And have you been in the situation where you've been working with a client and done it? You know, you've used the brief, but you've also used your own creative input and done
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you felt, and then it's gone wrong. Has that ever happened before?
Yeah. There's been an occasion where I've shot for a client and like I've pitched to them, like they've pitched to me what they want, and then I've come back and showed them the work and they haven't been happy with it. But I always say that it can come in two drafts. So I always propose that the first draft is a trial process, and then the second part is like we get it nailed down for what they want. But for my work that I do, well, I did do, I did a magic bar in Bath a while back, and that was a great shoot because that was partly what they wanted, but partly what I wanted, and it was just like we met in the middle. And for that work, it was so nice in the way that like it was hands off halfway through of like, oh look, we like what you've done, but can you do it this way? And then we did it and we tried it out, it was so successful. And I think I've never been worried to kind of put my opinion across and say like this is what I think works. Because I remember if I look back at myself now as like that young person starting out, I was always so scared to kind of question the other person that was questioning me. And now I'm more confident in the way that look, I will stand up for what I want and I know what I want. And I know at the end of the day that this client's paid me and I know they know what they need. But at the same time, I'm always saying, look, maybe you should try this. This might add a different approach. And we did that for the shoot, and then it was really successful, and it was campaigned and went in magazines, and they've been really successful with off the back of it.
You don't want to just be bossed around and told. I guess that is an element of it, but you also there should be time and
Yeah,
input for
exactly.
you to express what you feel because you're essentially you're taking the photo. So
Yeah, you've essentially got to look at it in the way that they've never taken a photo before, so they're giving you a set of guidelines of how they think it should be done. And obviously it's you have to have it, or you have to look at it as in that's how it should be done. But you have to also take into consideration that you're a photographer, you're good at what you do, and you put across your flavor or your style that you've brought through, which makes you stand out from every other person.
what's been your most favorite client based
Client-based
shoot?
product.
Yeah.
Ooh. So a good, it was a friend, but obviously it was a client at the time. It was when I went to he had a barber shop, and he's a great guy and a great friend of mine now, and that's kind of how got to know him. But we started to shoot a collection of um, products that he'd been represented for by another organization. And he just went in and he said, look, this is the style that I want, but can we just completely play around? And we were doing all sorts of things like, I don't know, we did a bit of studio, we did a bit of like environmental portraits, and it was just like a really good vibe. Which kind of resulted in a friendship, and for me that's so good because now I've formed this friendship with this guy that we now shoot regularly, even if it's not paid or unpaid or paid. We've gone on to shoot stuff and it's gone in magazines. We've done campaign shoots together, portraits. And I'd say for me, that was probably the most rewarding commission I've had.
Because to mention you mentioning the barber industry, that was one of the things I was going to bring you up
Yeah.
on. Because there have been it's kind of it's reoccurring. You've done quite a few collaborations
Yeah. So
within.
that is the guy. That's the first commission was through him. And then that's just been a repetitive thing now. Like whenever he needs something new that picks up the phones, like, look, this is what I want. Can you do it? And that's kind of taken off really. Not that
Um,
I'm trying to limit myself to be a photographer that shoots just for barbershops, but that is how I formed this connection.
I didn't know beforehand whether you were that was something you wanted to pursue. Um,
No, no.
but I kind of noticed it throughout your work, and I was like, maybe I should probably ask you on that because it's quite interesting. see
Yes,
how
yeah,
that started off. In terms of like portfolio,
yes.
what is your process for creating a cohesive portfolio of your work?
Do you know what? When I first started out with my portfolio, I was trying to do everything. I was trying to do product, studio, fashion. But then I've realized like I know what I'm good at now. So I've just completely stripped back to portraiture and corporate. And I think with a good and a strong portfolio should be what not it doesn't have to be one genre. I feel like you have to have don't feel like you're overdoing it or you're trying to do everything. Really like find your niche of either like studio or product and then just focus on that. Because I feel like if you're pursuing photography, then everyone's going to be able to do everything at some point. But if you can really like focus in on one particular area, then just keep developing that skill over time and keep bettering yourself and getting better and better and better and better. And then eventually someone will pick you up solely off of the fact that they like what you've done, like a portrait, for instance. They think, oh, that'll work on one of our adverts or that'll work for one of our campaign shoots. I think that's the best way. Does that make sense? I feel
No, it
like
does. Yeah, no, I feel like you've explained that well.
hard in terms of a portfolio because it's what I think a portfolio is what you want it to be, but obviously there's limitations to what your portfolio should have. And I feel the best bit of advice is maybe make sure that you're not trying to do everything.
Because I think even I was going to ask in terms of like your website, for example, do you
Yeah.
feel like through creating or having even having your website up, has that generated more work for yourself?
Um, yeah, my website's really good actually. I get lots of people through there, but I get lots of people through Instagram as well. But for me, like I really want to start marketing and branching out into kind of getting my documentary stuff seen more because I haven't had many exhibitions in terms of that. If I'm being completely honest, I never really know how to go about. I love the shooting part of things, but then it's trying to find out that final step for me is the hardest. I've always found that I struggle with trying to get it in front of people. So I think my website's good in terms of generating commissions or corporate work. But yeah, I really want to try and like venture out into how I can get my work on walls.
Because
Definitely.
one of the things I was going to suggest is it's particularly if you're doing more documentary or you want to get more of your documentary work out there, it's just talking to people about it
Yeah,
because that is a great way for people to be educated about your projects, understand the details of your reasoning, your passion behind things, your
definitely.
experiences.
I've had I went back to my old university to talk about well, not actually talk about my work, but help them do curate their final major projects. And just hearing them is so rewarding, just being able to talk about work. So I feel like for me, kind of going back into that environment, talking about my work to them was so rewarding because I was able to break it down. And I even found out things that I didn't think I'd done within the project that they could pick up on. But I'm going to try and push. I'm definitely looking for next year is trying to push out more of my projects, and especially this project that I've done Sparrows, because it's slowly I think started to gain interest. But it's just trying to find the right people in the right places.
No, I honestly think it's something you should definitely get out there. I feel like it's a story that's worth telling and worth sharing for other people. And I also think because you're I guess you're on the fence of whether or you were on the fence of whether you wanted to push out or not. But the fact that you thought about it, I
Yeah,
think is quite a good sign.
I've only ever
Um,
really showed the work in all to like the closest people to me, um, just because some of it is so dark. I've had a couple of people that I've shown it to say, "Oh, look, I don't know if that should go out," and I'm stuck in this like two-way system of like, do I put it out there? Do I not put it out there? At the end of the day, I've got to look at it as just art. That's all it is. It's just a project of art that lots of people can relate to, and if it can just help one person share their story, then that's what I want really.
yeah, and I don't think you should go in with an idea of what it's going to be like. I think that's with a lot of things. You shouldn't go in with thinking of what it's going to be like or how are people going to react,
Yeah,
because you haven't done it yet, so you won't know until you've done it. Um,
exactly, Liam.
So I think people are always going to be like, maybe you should put this work out, or maybe you should, or whatever that is. Agree to disagree.
Mm,
Um, it's all about the process. It's all about the journey and just doing
100%.
what you
I feel
can.
like
You
even when it got published with the Royal Photographic Society in the journal, like for me that was huge because I always thought, oh no, I'm never going to do that because I'm not good enough. You always got that internal like thought in your head saying that, oh, you've only done this because of this. But like when that got published for the first time, I was like, oh look, maybe I can like get my work out there, or maybe I can get my work seen, and that's kind of why I want to continue doing it because you just get that adrenaline buzz of like knowing that what you've done hasn't just been like worthless. So yeah, fingers crossed, hey?
I think you're gonna do it. You're gonna smash it, as you said to me before we came on here. Um, I think you're gonna do it, man, because you're very confident and you know exactly what you want.
Yeah,
And you're very true to yourself. You stick to your word.
you say that now, but we'll see.
No pressure, no pressure.
No pressure. No pressure at all.
So, Mike, one of the projects I wanted to discuss with you about was In the Flight of Darkness, basically a series which explores individuals who suffer from being visually impaired. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask kind of what led you to your study or your interest within this.
So that started in college. No, no, sorry, university. I went over to my grandparents' house one afternoon, just sat down with my granddad talking, and found out that he had a form of macular degenerative disorder with his eye. So his eyesight is slowly going. I was sat there and I was thinking, what I do is so visual. Like, what would happen if I lost my eyesight? And I just got so like interested in it sounds bad, but I got so interested in sight loss and like the people that like suffer with sight loss, but at the same time, like they can lead these extraordinary lives. And again, that kind of led me down the pathway of like finding out about all these different individuals and like the trades they do, or the jobs they do, or the careers they've had. Um, Even in the midst of the fact that they have sight loss or are going to be visually impaired in later life. Um, and again, yeah, I think it was just that pure fascination of my, I would say, inquisitiveness.
In terms of like, because I know you worked with like a group of different individuals, kind of
Mm.
how did you sort? How did you like source these people?
So the first man that I saw was he was a carpenter. He's visually impaired and he's a carpenter, which is amazing. Like he creates these ornate like staircases and cabinets. Um, I knew him it was a friend's dad. And I kind of knew that he had sight loss, but I wasn't 100% sure. So then I started to photograph him in his like I think it's like factory. Got chatting to him, and then I kind of was then led down a path to another person who I knew, and they hadn't been born with sight loss, but they are slowly losing their sight. And then I got chatting to them, and they said, "Look, come and join this group that gathers together on a Tuesday afternoon of a visually impaired group." And then I got in, got chatting to all these different people, and that's kind of where it took off. Really, photographed them, and then made a series of work for that project, which was then made into a book, a Braille book. So I learned over a couple of weeks to learn Braille, only slightly, but not amazingly. And I embossed Braille over the images that I made. So then I made a book that was all about touch. So for the people that were obviously partially sighted, they could read this Braille and it explained all the colors, the textures, the situation, the kind of the background of the story of them. But at the same time, it was there for the people that hadn't had the sight loss and they could feel the Braille, kind of get into that sense of touch. And it was all about the senses. And then that was exhibited in Bristol at Centre Space Gallery. And that project is ongoing. I would like to find some more individuals that are partially sighted that would love to tell their story. But for me, the youngest person that I photographed was Ella. She was 22 at the time. I don't know whether I was 22 or 21. And she was a partially sighted student at Oxford University. And I just thought that's amazing. The fact that you can still go to one of these really prestigious universities, regardless of disability, gender, or race, you know, and I don't think that should stop anyone. And that was the whole reason why I wanted to include an age range of like really young to really old.
And I think I love the idea of the book being done in Braille, because I feel like that really compensates for the background of the actual project itself. And also it's a whole different kind of immersive experience.
And I haven't actually I haven't pushed it out in front of anyone because I just again I'm not sure how to do it. That's the thing. I hold on to all this work and I've got it. It's in my room actually in my drawers of many photo books that I've tried to do. It just sits there. But I think again, like how do you know or when do you know a project's finished? You know, it's always hard. There's
Because I would say a project is never finished, really.
exactly.
Most projects, a lot of projects are ongoing, and you'll find that later in life that you're going to want to continue it in some way or form. Don't see it as like you putting out there that it's finished.
Yeah.
It's like chapter one in a sense, or like
I think it's definitely a project that I will push forward because I found interest through the National Institute for the Blind. So I think I might be working with them hopefully in September to do a series. Um and a couple of agencies in London as well. So we'll see what happens.
and I also think it'll be very beneficial for those both part of the project and who are visually impaired.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
because in some ways you're giving back.
But that's
Um,
exactly what I always try and go back to is like I always want to give back to the people. You know, I'm never doing it for my own personal gain
yeah.
at the end of the day.
And what's like, is there something in particular that you've taken away from working on this project? And do you feel like because of
Um,
this project, I also said earlier, but in terms of this project, do you think it will impact, say you were to continue with the same project, do you feel like it
yeah,
would impact your approach later down the line?
it's definitely impacted me in the way that like it sounds very cliche, but like I don't take life for granted. I know that's so easy to say. I just don't take like my eyesight for granted, like in such a visual process. Like the face of adversity and the fact that they've lost their sight, but they don't let it affect them has really affected me 100% in the way that I was like, wow, like, if they can do this and they've lost their eyesight, then I shouldn't moan about something so small in life, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree.
That's definitely what I took out of it.
Because you're understanding it from, even though you may not have the same direct disability, um,
So,
you're still being able to adapt from that. Because as you said, if they can do it,
yeah.
and the thing they're dealing with is much more. Even as you said, like even the people that you work with, how over time their vision is slowly getting worse.
Mm,
Like for
definitely.
example, I'll bring something up. So like for example, my mum, she's at that stage.
Okay. Mm,
We've known for years, but over time her vision has just become quite like worse and worse.
yeah.
And she's doing so much. She's trying to do her own business kind of stuff. She's doing loads of interviews with people. She's doing talks with people.
Amazing.
I'm like I can't complain. Like this is
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing that even in the face, like you know that you are eventually going to lose your sight, like the fact that you can still carry on, and then there's so many ways that you can use it to be a positive. Definitely, that's amazing.
I know we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, but I just wanted to see if we could go into a bit more detail about it in terms of the Royal Photographic Society and kind of what
Yeah.
that means for you. And
Oh gosh, what as in I would say for me like that is my probably my biggest accomplishment within photography to this day, because it's very prestigious. I never thought I'd get it, if I'm completely honest. But for me, it was so rewarding in the fact that the project that was published was the project that I'd done specifically for my grandparents. And I was able to tell my grandfather just before he passed away that it got published because I was told a couple months before that it would be published before he passed away. So And that kind of sealed it for me. That was kind of the icing on the cake in the way that like it it got to places where I wanted it to go, and I feel that that chapter is now closed in my life. It's probably like the darkest period of my life, in many ways. So that was kind of a nice little pick me up, if you know what I mean.
Like moving forward, do you feel like, in some ways, do you feel like this both memory and moment for you or accomplishment for yourself has made you more like stronger or more confident as a person?
Oh, definitely. Like, I'm definitely more confident now than I was like as a person and as a creative. Yeah, it's weird. Like, I don't think much has changed, but I think my perspective on life in general, and just again not taking things for granted. Um, and it's, you look back and you think, oh, that was a dark time. And then you look forward, and I look forward now and I think, oh my gosh, so much has changed in my life over the past 3 4 months in better ways. Like I'm in a much better headspace, and I'm starting to pick up my camera again, and I'm creating work, and I'm slowly getting recognition for what I do. And for me, that's the most important thing. Like, even though I've gone through that, I know that there's still so much that's happening and so many good things, and it's just about just being consistent and being able to just do what I love.
And in terms of, let's say, like in the next 5 years,
Oh,
like,
I knew this
this is
question was coming. I knew this question
it's
was
it's always good to ask this. My mum recently asked me this, and I hadn't had much thought into it. But I gave like a rough outline of what I'd like to do. But where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, or like what would you like to be working on?
Do you know what? I would love to just continue to do what I do. But obviously, I don't know. I think just keep creating, keep keep myself surrounded by family and friends, and just keep shooting, keep doing what I love. And I know that for me, I don't want it to be a full-time job. And I know like my other job that I do, I absolutely so passionate about in terms of like managing projects and corporate projects and project management. But I think that's what I want to do, is just stay the same but be better.
And obviously, I know we've spoken about previously, but I'm assuming eventually you're going to move to Bristol, so I can actually not
Yeah.
there's no rush, but yeah, you are
Oh
quite
no,
close to me
no.
anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you still owe me a drink.
That is true. Um,
Bristol, Bath, like Bath based pretty much all the time now. So
yeah,
I'll be around there, or Bristol, or I'm such a country bumpkin, so somewhere in the countryside.
there's
Yeah.
even, this is like going off topic, but even obviously Cam's still basically going to move down at some point. Yeah, I think I can see a lot of new and interesting things happening to you in the future. I feel like you're very bright, and you've gone. I feel like you've gone through a lot, and you've been able to, in some ways, use the experiences that you've been through to your advantage.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
100%.
and you make really good work, but I do think you need to start like getting your work out there.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're just going to hoard work and not release anything.
yeah, I definitely want to I want to do that 100%. So like, if anyone knows of anyone, shameless plug. Um yeah, I think, I don't know, like it's hard, isn't it? Like I know most of the work that I've got is still ongoing, and I think everyone forms an attachment with what they create, but I'm definitely starting to feel like it's almost there. Maybe in the next couple of months, and I'll start pushing it.
What's next for you? What do you have coming up?
I'm flying out to Canada in a couple of months' time to work on a job. Um, that's not, I have to, can't disclose what it is. I'm gonna be continue to shoot a series on autism with a friend of mine. Haven't done it for a while because I've just been so busy doing other things, but I'm gonna pick that back up. So hopefully you'll see a bit more of that. And then yeah, hopefully get some work out there, get some work in some galleries, get some work exhibited, and then a couple of private views. Keep creating, just see where it goes.
I look forward. I'm very excited for you.
Thank you, bud. Appreciate that.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank you for having
Really
me.
glad we managed to get this set up.
Yeah, it's been a
And
long time coming.
yeah, it has been. Yeah, if people want to check out Mike's work, absolutely go mental. Go visit him. sorry, mybikephoto.com.
Yeah, it's just in the link in the
Yeah.
bio. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
See you. Bye.